Yo, what is up YouTube? Thanks for clicking on this video. So in today's video, I'm going to be doing something a little bit differently than what I've normally done so far on this channel. In all my previous social commentaries, I've just talked into the camera alone. But in today's video, I recently had the chance to talk with Geoff Walters, who runs a coaching program called Social Skills for Nerds. He's someone who, like me, grew up feeling awkward, isolated, and unsure how to connect with people. And we sat down to have a really open and honest conversation about what it's like to overcome that. So we talked about things like therapy, confidence, imposter syndrome, and how learning to communicate can actually make you a better engineer overall. So I think a lot of programmers and engineers struggle with social anxiety, and whether you're an introvert, you're just starting your career, or you're still trying to find your place in the tech world, I think you can get a lot of value out of this conversation we had. So with that introduction out of the way, let's get into it. So first of all, Geoff, thanks so much for coming on to the channel, and thank you for talking with me. How are you doing today?
Thanks, Nicholas. I appreciate the warm welcome. I'm excited for this conversation.
Me too. This is the first time I've had someone on my channel like this before, and yeah, I'm excited to see where this conversation goes.
Me too, man.
So to start off, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself? How did you find my channel? What led you to want to have a conversation with me? And what is your background?
Sure. So I should say, first of all, just for the sake of honesty, that I'm not an engineer. So I guess I'm sort of an outlier in this room, just by nature of that fact. But I am firmly a nerd. I've been a nerd my whole life. I was the kid in school that didn't have any friends and just studied all the time. I'm the son of two teachers, so I sort of very much over-identified with the school system growing up. The consequence of that was I got very good grades at school. I went to Cambridge University in the UK, as you can tell by the accent, I'm originally from the UK. And I thought I was doing everything right. I was doing everything by the system. And what I came to realize was that there's a very big difference between academic success and work success. I'm sort of lumping those two things together, and social success. So I sort of woke up at the age of about 21 or 22 and realized that I didn't really have any friends, which was rather difficult to deal with at the time. And so I guess like any 90s kid, I used the internet to teach myself how to socialize. That led me to falling in with some people that perhaps weren't the most mature. Sometimes when you're ignorant, it's easy to listen to the loudest voices rather than the wisest voices. But I persevered in my journey, and I started to realize a couple of years after that the social skills I had been learning were actually quite manipulative, and they weren't really helping me connect to people in real life. And I guess this was 2013. That sort of marked the beginning of the more mature journey that then started at that point in my life. So from there, I had a lot of therapy. Credit to my therapists, they helped me a lot. There were lots of them. I think I worked with 7 or 8 of them over the last 15 years or so. I read a lot of books. I listened to a lot of podcasts, also listened to a lot of YouTube. Big fan of Jordan Peterson and also of Mark Manson. Those two guys are kind of my personal heroes. They helped me a lot. And slowly but surely, I started to learn how to connect to people. I started to build up a group of like-minded friends. And I started to become really obsessed in kind of a positive way with this particular subject of becoming more social, becoming, I guess, also more psychologically grounded. I think the two things are connected. And I started sharing the things I was learning with the people close to me. And I guess about 2 years ago, I first had the thought, could I do this for a living? Sort of start sharing the things that I'd been learning with other people. About 1.5 years ago, I started to take that a bit more seriously, and I created a coaching site. At that point, it was a very generic coaching site. It wasn't specifically focused on social skills. And then at the beginning of this year, I started Social Skills for Nerds, and I can now go to a party and introduce myself as I'm a social skills coach for nerds, which is quite a cool thing to be able to say to people. So to come back to the other part of your question, I found your channel, and you seem like the sort of person that I'd like to talk to. And it also seems like you've been on your own social journey, which I'm curious to hear more about in a second. And I could see you posting content about the more social and cultural part of being an engineer. So particularly that video about the state of the job market. And I saw that content was doing well, so I thought it'd be interesting to have a conversation.
Okay. Well, wow, man. I mean, that's a very powerful story. Thanks for sharing that. Um, yeah, I mean, I have a couple of questions to ask you after this, but I guess I'll go ahead and introduce myself as well and kind of my background. So, yeah, my name is Nicholas Facciola. I grew up kind of as a nerd also. I was one of those kids where I didn't really have too many friends growing up. I When I got to middle school, I was bullied quite frequently for just various things. I had all the traits in middle school that you could pick on someone for. I had I had acne, I had braces, I was skinny. I had interests that didn't align with the popular kids very well. I was always interested in computers. I didn't really start programming from a young age. I actually didn't get into it until college. But during, I was always a good student. I really, math was my best subject. So I really enjoyed, math and science. I was okay-ish at English and social studies, but math was always kind of my strong suit. And yeah, I mean, I think a lot of those early sort of interactions in middle school kind of shaped the foundation for how I saw myself growing up, even when those things weren't true anymore. So, like as an example, even now, it's hard for me to go out into public and introduce myself to people because I still think back to when I was in middle school and people would tell me why are you so awkward, your your voice is super high. I don't even know, man, like some of the insults they would come up with, and it's just like that kind of stuff stuck with me until I actually did start going to therapy myself, and around the age of 18, I've also had several different therapists. Some have worked well for me, others really haven't. And what I started to notice is that a lot of the issues that I thought of myself wasn't actually true. It was just what I was, projecting onto other people's thoughts of me when they hadn't actually, had any reason to say that to me themselves. So yeah, as I got into college, I went and I got a degree in computer science. And during college, I was really into game development. I started learning to program Unity. And because of that, in addition to doing my coursework, I would, make games on the side. And because of that, I was able to get a job at the university, actually, where I worked on a grant study, a federal work study. And it was grant funded, and I got to actually get paid to make games for the school. And those games got played in like various high schools, and they were used for my professor's research. So that job was really fun. That got me into, when I graduated, got me into Intel. And then I worked at Intel as a product development engineer for a couple of years. before, as you saw in the video that you watched, we had a mass layoff happen, and my entire organization actually got let go. So it wasn't just me; it was hundreds of people all at once. But during that time, I was able to learn a lot about myself, and I was able to learn a lot in my career. And I was able to get exposed to some very, very brilliant engineering minds. So now I'd say I'm at the point where I have, that side of me where I feel awkward. It's always there. It's always ruminating, but I feel like I have a lot more confidence now. And honestly, this YouTube stuff has been quite the outlet for me to kind of express that and get over some of those feelings that were sitting inside of me. So yeah, really, that's where I'm at today, and it's all brought me here to this conversation. So
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. I mean, honestly, so just for the sake of honesty, we met yesterday and we had a little chat just before this conversation. And as you said, you had written to me over email that you also somebody who had a background as being socially awkward. And meeting you yesterday, I didn't find that at all. You seemed like incredibly grounded and warm, definitely introverted, in the same way that I also think I'm introverted. And I think you're right that that'll always be part of your nature. There's actually some interesting research on that suggests that our temperament is one of the areas of our personality that's the least likely to change over time. So, you might be able to become more confident, for example, and it sounds like you've done that just in the same way that I've done that. But you'll still be an introvert. And I'm sure also to echo what you said, that this work that you're doing on YouTube is going to help you continue to overcome that part of your nature and just become more socially confident. And perhaps you'll invite other people to speak with you, and just sharing your thoughts, as you said to me yesterday, in front of potentially thousands of people online. I think there's also something quite therapeutic about that.
Yeah, and I think that before you post anything vulnerable like that sort of content that I posted, you're always going to have these thoughts in your head. Oh well, what if somebody says this, or what if XYZ happens? You start kind of doomsdaying a bit. And normally what I found is that there's always going to be like some people in the comments who are going to be trolls. They're going to say
Sure.
hateful things to you. But to me, that's outweighed by if what I post helps one person, and that helps that one person, I think that's worth going through what the trolls have to say. And the reality of it is like those people who are going to say hateful things to you and try to bring you down a notch. I think it's because most of the time they have something in themselves that they don't like, and then they can project that onto you. They see you as a target and they want to bring you down to their level. So I mean, really, I think being, like you said, having the ability to be vulnerable and share your message with the world, I think is very, very powerful.
Absolutely. I'm curious, because I mean, the nature of your channel is it's really about engineering, and there's quite a lot of technical content. So I imagine that the people who are listening to this are mostly engineers. Perhaps some of them would identify as nerds. I don't know.
I think so.
I'm curious, to what extent do you think that your inner journey, so including but not limited to therapy, to what extent do you think that that's made you a better engineer?
Oh, I would say by quite a lot, because I think that doing the actual coding is just one aspect of the job, but I think that having the ability to interact with people and work as a team, and to be able to speak especially speaking in public, which is something that I've actually talked quite a bit about in therapy, because that was a huge issue of mine. Having those skills, I think, can take you almost just as far, if not even further, than being an excellent programmer. I think a lot of people they tend to focus on And I mean, as a programmer myself, you know, that's what you want to do. I mean, you kind of choose the work because it's, you know, solitary, and you like, you know, being in your own space, having your work, and, you know, being able to think and get your work done on your own. And, you know, that's great and all, but the reality of it is that, like, the reason why do we even write software in the first place? Well, you know, you're writing it for other people to use.
Exactly.
And if if you're not able to, you know, interact with the people, and find what other people want and need, you're not going to be able to, you know, deliver software that works for, you know, a broad spectrum of users. That's just the way that I see it. And also, and even smaller scale than that, is just like, your manager has to know what you're doing, you know, like having that rapport with your manager and your team, knowing that I would have weekly one-on-ones with my manager, which actually at first were sort of nerve-wracking for me, because you know, I was afraid that I was gonna be judged. But you know, after I did it a little bit, you know, you just kind of start to build, you know, sort of a friendship with them. And I think having that, like, trust, and being able to communicate with them, you know, what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, can help you out quite a bit, because if they know what you're doing, then, you know, they're going to vouch for you, and ultimately that's going to, you know, project you higher in your career.
Mm-hmm. I agree with everything you said there. There's something I've noticed over the last few years, which I think is universal, but I also think it perhaps especially applies to engineers and programmers. I think for somebody who's very left-brained, it's easy to sort of think that we're all a bit like robots, a bit like ChatGPT. You know, like if you put a certain input in, you'll get a certain output out. Like if your professional life is revolving around that way of thinking, and if you're getting rewarded financially for that way of thinking, I guess it's quite easy to think that way in general. I think especially as men as well, that we're also sort of socialized to think, well, we're men, we're logical, we don't have an emotional side. So I think there's a gender component to it as well. What I've observed over my 35 years on this planet is that the thing that's really meaningful, no matter how introverted we are or how left-brained we are, is just connecting to people. And you don't have to connect to people in a way that feels inauthentic or forced. So, I mean, for us as introverts, if we were to go and, I don't know, speak on a stage in front of 10,000 people, or go to a huge party with like several hundred people, I would imagine, I mean, just speaking for myself, but I imagine this is true for you as well, we'd probably find that quite draining, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. But I think there is definitely something to be said for truthful, meaningful, sincere interaction. So as an introvert, for example, it might be that you seek out, I mean, this is certainly something that I did and have done and continue to do. It might be that you seek out one-on-one conversations because you just feel like that matches your energy better. I mean, when I was learning to socialize, whenever I found a person whose values I vibed with and who I enjoyed talking to, I made a conscious effort, and I did this for years, to keep them in touch, just to stay in touch with them. Mm-hmm. And we were often just speaking on the phone, or we were meeting and going for coffee, or going for dinner or something like that. And very, very often, I would say 80 or 90% of the time, it was just a one-on-one interaction, because that allowed us to go deeper. It allowed us to talk about the sorts of things that I enjoy talking about, and my friends also enjoy talking about. So I think there's a lot to be said for leaning into your temperament and leaning into your nature. And then also understanding that just because you might be an introvert, you might be a nerd, it doesn't mean that A, you don't have a social side, because we're all human and we're sort of evolved to connect to other people. And B, this is something we were also talking about yesterday, I think it's very important to know that social skills, they can be learned just like any other skill set. I mean, I was thinking the other day, it would be funny if anybody I went to school with ended up finding this content, because, as I said, I was such a nerd back in the day. I was known for being the studious, serious kid. So Yeah, it would be super funny for me if anybody from school found this content, because, as I said, I was somebody who was super awkward, didn't have any friends, and that's what I was known for in school. I was also bullied like yourself. And I've chosen to go into this profession because the thing that's been the most meaningful for me over the last 15 years, and the thing that I've worked on the most, and the skill set that I have acquired, is connecting to people and being social with people. And that doesn't make me an extrovert, as I was saying. It just makes me like an introvert who's learned to appreciate, firstly, himself, because I think it begins with an inner journey, and then also the people around me. And so now I'm talking to you from my co-working space here. It's fun for me to seek out like little daily interactions, just in the office, just say, hey, how are you doing? And just get to know the people around me. And I wouldn't have said that, 10 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago.
Yeah, and I think that those little daily interactions that you mentioned, go a super long way about how people perceive you in the office. I mean, you don't. I think I struggled with this. That I always felt like if I was going to have a conversation with somebody, that had to be, a very riveting, and I had to be funny. I had to make the conversation, super enjoyable for them. Otherwise, it wasn't worth me going up to them. And I kind of realized that that's not actually true. That's just a belief I had in my head that, even just a simple hi, hello, that can go a long way into, building somebody's perception of you in a positive way. And I try to do that, now every time I would go into the office. It's just, when I walk in, say hi to everybody, demonstrate at least that I'm friendly and approachable, because I want people to perceive me that way. And then, not every connection that you make with somebody has to go and be super deep. I think
I
that's
agree.
I think that's something, as as an introvert, like you said, going to a party with a bunch of people. I always found that difficult because I think when you mentioned kind of programmers, and nerds, we kind of like to think about things, logically, and if I do this, then this will happen, then this will happen. I think when you go into those kind of big social situations, you end up having sort of the same conversation multiple times over and over and over again. And then
Who are you? What do you do? What's your name? All that kind of good stuff.
exactly, and then it starts to get predictable, and so you get very bored of it, and you get very, and then that limit, and then that limits your ability to then go out and have those conversations with those people in those settings. So I think I would do the same, that I would always want to try and seek out one-on-one conversations that could stem much deeper than the small talk. But I think a lot of times I had trouble sort of going the step to taking the first step to introduce myself and even initiate the conversation. So a lot of times my coping mechanism to that has been to withdraw. And what I've noticed is that even though I would consider myself an introverted person, when I'm in these states of like withdrawal and I'm not talking to anyone at all, I actually feel much more sad and more lonely than,
Exactly.
even though if even compared to just having a couple of conversations with some close friends every now and then. I mean, I think that takes my mood and my ability to do work actually. I mean, I started to recognize that stuff is not just important as far as building friendships, but it's important to everything. Like my work would start to suffer, my mental health would start to suffer, my physical health would start to suffer. So really, I think having even some of those small conversations with people does go a long way, even for an introvert.
I totally agree with that. And as you said, we can be introverts. Perhaps we need less social stimulation than extroverts. I think that's probably true, but we definitely still need some. And I think that, again, speaking from personal experience here and from the people I've talked to and coached, I think that the skill of approaching someone is also something that can be learned. I mean, goodness, when I was 20, the idea of approaching someone would have terrified me, especially if they were attractive and female. Like, absolutely no chance at all. Then, as I said, I sort of became a bit more manipulative and sort of overcompensated and was like, look at me, I'm this cool guy who knows how to talk to people. And in fact, it was all just a front. But I think, if there are some benefits that came out of the sort of mistakes of that chapter of my life, one of the things I did learn was that you can just approach people. And most people, I mean, unless you approach them like a complete arsehole, like most people are going to be reasonably receptive, or at the very least neutral when you approach them. And then, of course, one other thing that you can do is you can have a look into things like body language to see if a person's open to talking to you. So if you're at a social event and somebody's sort of staring off like this and they've got their arms crossed, or maybe they're on their phone, perhaps they've got their legs crossed as well, their sort of their whole body language is closed off.
Checking the weather.
It's quite exactly. It's quite unlikely that person's going to want to talk to you, maybe, but the odds are on the lower side. If, on the other hand, the person's sort of bored, their arms aren't crossed, maybe they're just like having a conversation with another person, why not go and introduce yourself, as you were saying? Why not go and join them? I want to ask you, just to bring the topic back to sort of programmers and nerds. So I have my own thoughts on this from my own experience, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Why do you think that this is a topic that some programmers struggle with, and perhaps are also known socially for struggling with?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of layers to it. I mean, I think the first part is just like kind of the cognitive, sort of profile of somebody who gets into programming. I think it sort of attracts, the people who grew up, playing on their computer, kind of realizing that,
Check.
I mean, that's how it was for me. It was like when I went into college, it wasn't really like I knew I wanted to be a programmer. It was sort of, well, I have all these options of majors to choose from, and I don't really know what I want to do. Computer science at that time was like, you do it and you come out of school and you get a good salary, basically guaranteed. It's not like that anymore, but it was, when I started school. And, I just was the kind of kid where I was like, I'm decent at math and I like playing video games. Why not do this? So that's
pretty logical, right?
Yeah. That's kind of what drove me to do it. And I think, there's a lot of other guys who are, similar to me in that way, where it's like they like the predictability of computers compared to the unpredictability of interacting with people.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So that's about safety, actually, and it's also connected to vulnerability, because it's scary to put yourself out there, and it's scary to talk to a real person where you might be rejected, and maybe the other person won't like you. But if you're talking to a computer, as my IT teacher famously said in school when I was 14, quote, "Computers are stupid. They basically just do what you tell them." So it's way easier than God forbid you have to go and talk to a real person.
I mean, and yeah, even to this day, even though I've gotten better, I think, at communicating with people, it's still like I know what a computer is going to do when I program it to do something. I give it certain instructions, like I know what the output is going to be. So it's almost like I understand computers a lot better than I understand people. So I think it kind of drives that personality type, where it's like you want to know, when I put this in, I always get this thing out. And, when you're in social interactions, not that, social interactions are totally unpredictable. Of course, like you said earlier, it's kind of a skill you can learn. As you do it more and more, you start to figure out patterns of, if I approach a person this way, they will respond probably like this, but it's not always consistent. So I think that sort of fear, the unknown, I think that, drives a lot of why you see introverts going into programming. I think another reason is just sort of like the way the way that you sort of built friendships. A lot of programmers, I think, sort of had friendships in, you know, the online space, and you
Hmm.
know, the on the computer. So a lot of your job is, you know, commenting on uh, GitHub pull requests, or, you know, talking over like Slack, uh, you know, various like IM channels, and computer channels. So you get used to that sort of communication, and that aligns well with the programming job. So I think that you know, if you grew up communicating that way, you're, you know, kind of predisposed to be better at that, and go for those types of jobs. Whereas, you know, like for me, if I were to go do like sales, oh man, like I don't know if I could do that. Like
Torture, right?
that would be
Yeah.
horrible, horrible. I cannot like just go cold call people and, you know, try to sell something. I actually tried when I was 19. I tried to apply to Best Buy, and I got to the second interview, and it was for a sales position in the computer floor. And I just thought, you know, I didn't have a degree at that time or anything, so it was just like, this is the kind of job I can do, and it's still somewhat aligned with tech, so I'll try.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I got to the second interview, and the hiring manager tried to pull one of those, you know, sell me this pen type of things, and I just completely stumbled. I had no idea what to say, so it's just like, I don't work this way. Like, if you don't want to buy the pen, don't buy the pen. That's not me at all. So, yeah.
But even in that statement, you know, there's some nice integrity and honesty actually. Um, so before getting into coaching, my main career was marketing, and I had a marketing agency in Germany for a while. One of the things I learned doing sales for that agency, which was, to your point, terrifying, is that introverts can actually be quite good at sales because we have a knack for listening to people.
That is true.
We have a knack for giving other people space to have to talk. Um, and also, to your point with your story about Best Buy, um, we're less likely to sort of force people into doing things that they don't want to do. So that means that when somebody does buy, they're likely to buy out of a genuine reason, which might make them want to come back as a repeat customer, for example. Just to sort of rewind 5 or 10 minutes, I wanted to share why I think it is that there are lots of nerds and programmers that struggle with stuff like this. I think everything that you said is valid, and I particularly liked what you said about security. That it just feels safer to be around a computer. And I imagine that's probably even truer for Gen Z than it is for my generation, just because tech is so ubiquitous these days.
Mm-hmm.
I was reflecting on this question before chatting to you today, and I think, to come back to what I was saying about growth mindset and this idea that everything can be learned. So if you don't have a skill, it's not that you don't have talent; it's that you just never learned the skill. And so then the question is, why did introverts and nerds never learn the skill, or only learn the skill in a limited way? And I think part of it is what you said, it's to do with security. Part of it is also what you said, to do with temperament. But I also think we were rewarded for other things. So rewarded in the sense of, oh, you did great at school, you know, that's where you get like your dopamine hit, or your sense of you're a good son or daughter. I think that's a common one. Or perhaps you're playing games online, and that's where you get your dopamine hit from. And you know, the games, they could have a social component, but they don't necessarily need to have a social component. And you combining that with what you said, if you're someone who feels more safe when you're on your own, you can see why you'd get, your nervous system in effect would get used to those type of rewards instead of more social rewards. And that's not to say that those type of rewards are necessarily bad. You know, this isn't a black and white issue. It's just to say that social skills can be learned. And I do sincerely believe that anybody, you know, no matter how awkward or autistic or whatever they think that they are, I do sincerely think that everybody can learn those skills.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not a neuroscientist by any stretch of the imagination, but I think when you're talking about rewards, I think it makes sense, from that standpoint of like, if I do this thing at home, I play this game, and I get rewarded in the game, and I go out in public, let's say I'm like a 13-year-old boy, I go out to school, and I get bullied for what I'm wearing. I get bullied when I try to talk to people. Of course, I'm going to gravitate towards the thing that's giving me rewards rather than put myself in the position, to be punished. And
That's a disincentive, actually, which
yeah,
is the opposite side of what we were just saying. Yeah.
yeah, and then as your brain is going to continue to push you towards, hey, if you do this, you'll get a reward. Versus you put yourself out in this position, you might get punished again. So it's like that just kind of reinforces itself, and then the problem is with that is then, like you said, you're not building the skills because you're not putting yourself in the situation where you need you're not putting yourself in the situation where you're going to develop the skills because you're always gravitating towards the isolation and the other side of it, right? I mean, and yeah, I think one thing that I talked about a lot in therapy was just part of it is exposure therapy. You have to kind of repeatedly put yourself in the situation. And so for me, like I said, I went to therapy a lot for public speaking because it's something I just like was deeply afraid of for a long time. And I mean, I can actually even share the reason why I think why it all started. I think when I was in high school, I had this presentation I was giving. I forget what the topic was, but I know my presentation was about esports, and I just remember the entire class laughed at me. They thought it was like the stupidest thing that I was talking about.
Which, when you were in middle school, is like the end of the world, right?
Yeah.
When everybody else around you is judging you and laughing at you.
Exactly, yeah. And then from that point on, I think I just associated always, like, if I give a speech in public, people are going to laugh at me. No matter, even though, like, after that situation, I've never had that happen again, right? Like, I've never had, I had that one thing, and those were just, they're just teenagers, but it's hard at that time, when I had a teenage brain myself, to kind of put that into perspective. It's like these people are just, and this isn't really a good representation, of the population. But now, when I give presentations at work, a lot of times I'm giving it to other engineers or, project managers who are also the kind of people who would, watch esports and listen to nerdy things. So it's like, a lot of it is just kind of knowing your audience, but also just like putting myself in that exposure therapy of like, I'm going to give this presentation. Oh, I didn't get laughed at this time. Okay, maybe it's not me. Like maybe it was just, some other factor. I do it again. And then slowly, you start to kind of reverse some of those effects that you had of the original negative experience.
Exactly. But perhaps it's wise just briefly defining exposure therapy, just in case people aren't familiar with the concept. So Jordan Peterson has a very nice example on this that I also like to share when I'm talking to people about this. So he treated a woman who was afraid of lifts. Do you know this story?
Mm-mm.
It's a pretty great story. So she was morbidly afraid of lifts to the point that, she wouldn't even, it's not just going into a lift, she wouldn't be able to even see a lift from like 10 meters away. So it was a really, really, really bad case of anxiety, really serious stuff. So, clearly someone like that, they come to therapy and they're trying to work out how can they get better. So the first thing he does is he's trying to figure out like the scale of the anxiety. So obviously, like being around a lift is far too much. So he says, can you be in the same room as a lift? Like if the lift's over there somewhere, are you able to do that? She said, oh, no, that's far too scary. So the next thing he did was he printed off a picture of a lift from the internet and he gave it a piece of paper. And he said, okay, if I give you this picture of a lift, can you deal with that? She said, oh, no, it's still too close. So, this is a really, really bad case. So he said, okay, here's a piece of paper. It's got a lift on. I'm going to stick that on the other side of the room that we're in. And then can you be in the same room as a piece of paper with a lift on? She was like, okay, I feel uncomfortable, but I think I can handle that. Good. So from a therapeutic point of view, he's worked out the level of anxiety that she can tolerate. That's a very good thing. So then exposure therapy is basically gradually increasing the exposure to the thing that she's scared of in order to gradually build up her toleration levels. So we basically reverse the same process I just explained. So the piece of paper, first it was 5 meters away, then it was 3 meters away, then it was a meter away, then it was on her lap, then she was holding it, then she was holding it in front of her face like this. And gradually, like, she's getting more and more comfortable about being around a lift. Then she was in the same room as a lift, then she was 5 meters away from the lift, then she was 3 meters away, etc., etc. And so he followed this program with her, and eventually she was able to go into a lift as if nothing happened, because he gradually exposed her to what she was afraid of. So if we bring this back to social skills for nerds, I guess one thing that you can do in terms of exposing yourself, and it sounds like both of us have done this as well in our respective ways, is just practicing talking to people. Do you know the startup term, to get out the building? I really like that term.
What is that?
Mm-hmm. So this is a term from the Lean Startup, if I'm not mistaken. The idea being that lots of entrepreneurs fall into hubris and they sort of fall in love with their own idea. I read a statistic a while back that said that literally 50% of startups fail because the founder fell in love with their own idea and they weren't exposing it to feedback. They just thought it was cool, so they made it. And then they were like, no one's using this. How strange. We ran out of money. What a shame. I've actually made this mistake as well myself, just for the record. So how do you deal with that? You get out of the building. So you go and expose yourself. You see the pattern I'm drawing here to real people, to real feedback. And then you see, is this actually something that people want? Does this solve a need in the market? And you can't do that just having internal conversations. You can't do that talking to your mom or your friend or whoever, because they're not going to give you unbiased feedback. So the idea is that you go out of the building and you expose yourself to reality. And again, to bring this back to exposure therapy and nerds, I think that one of the single best things that people who want to improve in this area can do is go out to the building and just talk to people. So once I had moved away from a sort of more manipulative paradigm to a more vulnerable and open paradigm, this is what I did, man, for like 5, 10 plus years. I would go out, I would talk to people, I put myself in social situations. Was it uncomfortable first? Yes. Did I get used to it over time? Yeah, sure. Doesn't mean that I never feel uncomfortable these days. Sure. I mean, it's even a bit uncomfortable, like having this conversation to some degree, because I'm not someone who like speaks in public super frequently. However, to come back to like growth mindset, if I wanted to become the sort of person who's more okay with speaking in public frequently, then having conversations like this is a very good way to do it. And if you want to become the sort of person who's okay with starting conversations, reading rooms, finding interesting things to talk about, being curious about what the other person's experience of life is, I think actually that curiosity is one of the things that leads to the most interesting types of conversations. All you can do is just expose yourself to that over and over again. And if it's too scary, to go back to the lift example, reduce the amount of exposure you're having until you reach a point that you can tolerate it. And I think exposure therapy is, the concept is absolute genius.
Yeah, I agree. That's a really great story about the lift. This is sort of off topic, but just because I'm American and I don't know. Is a lift the same thing as an elevator?
I should have known you would ask me that question. A lift is an elevator.
Okay.
There's probably another word for it that I don't know in American English. But I just said the British word without thinking about it.
I took the context clues, but at first I thought, is he talking about a ski lift? But then I was like, okay, yeah, no, a lift must be an elevator. But, yeah.
Jordan Peterson's Canadian, so I don't know what the Canadian English word for that is, whether it's lift or elevator. Yeah. Maybe they say both.
That's funny. But yeah, I mean, exposure therapy definitely helps, and I think one thing that I've sort of told myself, to start getting into the mindset of being able to overcome that anxiety, like you said, even having this sort of conversation, even though now I've got to the point where it's like I can do it, and I feel, once we get started, I feel comfortable doing it. Same with like going into interviews. It's like I always feel very, very nervous meeting new people and talking an interview. But once I get going, I can do it. I sort of ask myself, like, the person that I am now and the person that I strive to be, what would the person that I strive to be do in this situation? And
That's a great mental model. I
yeah,
love that.
if the answer to that is to do the thing, well, then I have to say to myself, I like to say my anxiety is lying to me, and then just try to do the thing, and face, if the worst outcome happens, I'd rather deal with that and at least say, I took the step that the person who I want to be would have taken in the situation, regardless of the outcome that happens from it.
I love that. I have a really good friend from Poland, and he's actually one of the most financially successful people I know. And he likes to say, and I think this might be a Nike quote, but I'm not entirely sure, so don't quote me on that. He likes to say when he's struggling with something, the only way to do it, the only way to do something is to do it. Is that Nike? I might be wrong about that, but
I think so.
It's a great quote. And at the same time, as somebody who's like delved quite deep into psychology, you also have to be a little bit careful that you don't minimize the emotion aspect completely and just negate it completely, because emotions are energy and emotion, like they're giving us some information that could be useful. So just sort of sweeping the emotions under the carpet probably isn't the most healthy way of dealing with it. At the same time, your emotions can be lying to you. They can be pointing you in a direction that's not helpful. And so like a coach I worked with a few years ago, she had this really cool framework for situations like this. The framework is pause, think, act. So you pause, you allow whatever thoughts and feelings that you're thinking and feeling to come to you. And then the cool thing is that then you, as a sovereign human, like you get to choose how you act in that situation. So you don't necessarily have to go with that first impulse. You might, sometimes the impulse is serving you, but you don't necessarily have to go with it. And in that quiet moment between having that initial impulse and making the decision, that's where your power lies.
That's a very good way to think about it. Yeah.
Yeah, she's a genius, that coach. She's super, super clever. I'm honored to have worked for her for a while. Imagine that people have listened to this conversation for the better part of an hour now, and they're thinking, okay, well, these guys have done the work, but where do I even start with learning this kind of skill set? Like, it's so overwhelming. I feel safer just in front of a computer, just writing some code. And again, I have some thoughts on this, obviously, because this is what I do for a living. But I'm wondering what you would say to members of your audience specifically who are listening to this video and thinking, God, this is so overwhelming. Like, where do I start? Yeah, where do you think they should start?
Well, yeah, I mean, first of all, I'm going to direct everybody who's watching this conversation to head over to your website. I'm going to put the link to your website in the description. So if you want to work with Geoff one-on-one and talk to him about some of the things you're feeling, obviously, I think this has been a great conversation, and I think any of you in the audience who would like to receive some help from him could greatly benefit by going over to his website and then scheduling a time to talk with him.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. But I guess another thing you can do, I would say start with your own network. I know I was one of those people where even to my own friends sometimes, who I knew would say yes to hanging out with me or talking about some more deeper topics. I would say try starting with them and just telling them about how you're feeling and see how they react, because you can honestly learn a lot from them. And then on top of that, I would say you can seek out community in your area. Try getting involved in something that you wouldn't normally go to on your own. So like for me, in my in my area, I just decided, I want to learn how to do yoga. Actually, I just went to
Good for you, man.
I just went to a yoga class, and there I can, those people, you have common interests with people, try to talk to them, just say, hey, how are you? In that, you can kind of expand your network that way. Just find interests that you like. Maybe if it's not something, on the computer, something you like in real life, just try going and doing it, and you'll meet people and kind of branch out your network that way. And I feel like the more small connections you can make, the more, if you think of it kind of like a tree, there's a tree, the more branches you make, the farther out you can go, and just see where things take you. I mean, also even just doing this, like I will say, I had no idea where like YouTube was gonna lead me when I started. I've now started to people have reached out to me on LinkedIn. People have reached out to me on Gmail, various platforms, and I never would have expected that when I started. I just started making videos, and I thought maybe some of my friends and family will watch this. I never expected to get 100,000 views on a video ever. So you never know what could happen.
Good for you, man.
Yeah, just try anything that you're thinking that you want to try. I'd say just start, and see. Not everything is going to work out. That's the other thing too. It's like not everything you try will lead you to the perfect solution you have in your brain. But the more things you try, the more likely you are to find something that sticks and works for you. That's what I would say.
I think that's great advice. I should get coaching from you. Hire you to be my social skills coach. No, I'm just kidding. So I'll keep this part very simple. And actually, you can even give a one-word answer to this. I think the one-word answer to this is truth. This is a huge part of how I think, at least. So what do I mean by truth? He says, going over his one-word answer. But I think that it's wise to be curious about the truth of what's going on inside you. So that's one element of truth. It's then also wise to share that experience with people in a way that is true to the relationship that you have with somebody. So if we're talking about an office environment, I don't think it's a good idea to go and share like your deepest, darkest secrets in the workplace. I think you would probably agree with me on that one. Like truth has to be boundaried. In other words, it has to be appropriate to how well you know the person, the nature of your relationship, how intimately you know each other, how safe the other person is as well emotionally. That's like another form of the truth situation. So all this is about truth at an internal level. And then I also think you can look at truth at an external level. So you can also think about, well, what's this other person going through? Like I hesitate to use the phrase their truth because it's a bit too culturally relative for me. But I like this idea of simply being curious about what the other person is experiencing. And then just listening to them and accepting what they say to you. That doesn't necessarily mean accepting it uncritically. If they're telling you things that are nonsense or they're just being offensive, then you're not being true to yourself if you're just listening to that uncritically. So we come back to truth again. But if there's one thing I've learned in the last 15 years, and this is actually at the core of the coaching methodology I created in February as well, it's that truth is healing. And even if the true statement you make is, I'm scared that a picture of a lift is in my hand, at least you're being true. Even if you're saying, let's imagine you go to a party and you're an introvert and you're a bit awkward and, some pretty girl comes up and talks to you, classic cliched situation. You might be tempted to think in that situation, oh, I should play it cool, and then she'll like me and then it will go great and then who knows what will happen. I would imagine that you would get more of a connection in that kind of situation by just saying, hey, I'm feeling a little bit awkward in this situation. Like, I don't know about you, but like, I don't know anybody else here. And I haven't been to a party in a little while. So I'm just kind of sitting here sipping my drink and don't quite know what to say. Do you see how that statement is immediately honest and true? And instantly it invites her to respond back in equal vein. And if she doesn't respond in equal vein, she's like, oh, what a loser. He's admitting that he's awkward. Well, then you've saved yourself like some heartache by talking to her in the first place. So really to come back point. To one word to summarize this whole conversation, at least from my perspective, truth.
Yeah, I think the word I would use is vulnerable.
Yeah.
I would say, having the ability to say how you really feel and having the ability to express your ideas in a way that opens yourself up to criticism and opens yourself up, also to the contrary, to people, really vibing with what you say. I think vulnerability is a great thing, because the more that obviously, like you said, you want to have some boundaries with it, and you want to put limits on what the level of vulnerability that you're willing to share is. But I think to a degree, the more that you put yourself in a vulnerable situation, all you're doing is you're finding who's going to stab you and who's going to grab your hand and go with you. Like you said.
So there's a motivational thought to somebody who's shy listening to this. You're going to go out and you're going to find who's going to stab you.
Hopefully they don't really stab you. I mean, I hope that does not happen to anyone listening to this conversation. If it does, that's really bad. But But yeah, I mean, like you said, I actually really like what you said. I think I'm going to use that next time I'm at a big, if I ever am at a big party, I'm going to use that next time I'm sitting here sipping my drink, feeling awkward, and then see what they say. I really like that, actually. Because like you said, it just opens yourself up to, if they say, why, well, you're a weirdo, and they leave, I mean, then like you said, you just saved yourself from being around a person you didn't want to be around anyways. So
exactly, yeah, and then how the other person responds says so much about their character and says nothing about yours for the record as well. So if the person's like, oh, that's interesting, tell me more about that, then they're responding sincerely, and that's a green flag that you can talk to them some more. But yeah, I think that to simplify, truth is the answer.
So Geoff, thank you. We're probably getting over a little bit over an hour here, so I'm going to wrap up the conversation here. But before we wrap up, I just want to say, everyone, I'm going to put the link to Geoff's website in the channel. It is socialskillsfornerds.co, and that is .co, not .com. Do not make that mistake, please. And on the first page of his website, he'll have a list of mistakes that nerds commonly make when learning social skills. If you want to go ahead and download that, you're not sure where to start, that is available for free on his website. So go ahead and click the link in the description if you want to learn more from Geoff and you want to have a conversation with him, or at the very least, go ahead and download his free PDF, and you can start on the same path that Geoff started on and I started on as well. So Geoff, thank you so much for coming and having this conversation with me today. I think that was a really good conversation, and I really appreciate having you on my channel, man.
Thanks, man. It's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed this conversation today. It's been awesome.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I thought that was a great conversation, and I hope you did as well. But before I close out today's video, I just wanted to make sure that everybody knows where to go if they want to get in contact with Geoff and work with him in his coaching program. So as I said in the video, head on over to socialskillsfornerds.co. Again, that is .co, not .com. And if you want to get a free PDF that it describes some of the most common traps and how to avoid those traps in your journey from awkward to confident, you can enter your name and email into this box and get your copy of the free PDF here. Then if you found value in the free PDF and you want to go further, Geoff also has some other options on his website that you can choose from. Here he has these worksheets that are all $10 and they're individual, and they teach you some of the social skills that he talks about in his coaching program. So we have worksheets such as boundaries, attachment style, self-acceptance, conflict, truth. All of these you can do by yourself, and they're at $10 a piece. If the worksheets don't interest you, he also has board games that he's created to teach these social skills in a fun and engaging way, and you can also play this with your friends. So for these, he's got 3 to choose from, ranging from $25 to $90, and again, these are games that are meant to build on these social skills. So if you're looking for something to do with your friends, but also build your social skills at the same time, the board games might be a good option for you. Lastly, Geoff operates these workshops, which are 60 to 90 minutes and are for groups of 6 to 12 people, and they come on a first come, first served basis, and it looks like they are $20 a person. So if you're a bit shy and you want a facilitator to kind of, lead you in a group setting to building these social skills, these workshops might be a good options. He also has this contact form here if you want to contact him one-on-one, and then you can do, in a conversation like I had with him today, or, just any other questions you have for him. If you want to get into contact with him, just go ahead and fill out this form on his website. So that's going to do it for today's video. I hope you found some value out of this conversation, because I sure know that I did. And I think that this is a really important topic for engineers and programmers to discuss, and it's one that we tend to shy away from because it's a bit uncomfortable. If you're someone who wants to come onto this channel and have a conversation with me like this, please reach out to me via email, which you can find. That's just nicholasfacciola@gmail.com. I'd love to set up another conversation and have more of these on this channel, because I really enjoyed that, and I'd like to hear more from the community and hopefully build up this community at the same time. So if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, a comment below, and subscribe for more content, and I hope to see you all in a future video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye-bye.